It all started with a single comment. A remark made casually during a live broadcast, one that seemed harmless enough at first but quickly spiraled into something much bigger. That's how these things usually go. Small words leading to big consequences. And this time, those words involved two women who couldn't have been more different. Karoline Leavitt, a sharp-minded lawyer from Boston, and Whoopi Goldberg, the iconic comedian and co-host of The View. Karoline was not someone people expected to make waves. She had always preferred staying in the background, working quietly and efficiently, but beneath her calm exterior lay a fierce determination. Growing up, she'd learned early on that life wasn't fair, and if you wanted justice, you had to fight for it yourself. It was this belief that drove her to become a lawyer, and now, years later, it was driving her straight into the heart of a legal battle no one saw coming. On the other side of the equation was Whoopi Goldberg, a household name known for her wit, humor, and outspokenness. As a co-host of The View, she spent her days engaging in heated debates about politics, culture, and everything in between. Her fans loved her because she said what others were too afraid to say. But sometimes saying too much can get you into trouble. This particular incident began when Whoopi made a remark during a segment on the show that touched a nerve with Karoline. At first, it seemed like just another day on The View, but soon after, the backlash began. For Karoline, it wasn't just about being offended. It was about feeling attacked personally and professionally. She believed Whoopi's comments crossed a line, painting her in a negative light and damaging her reputation. After consulting with friends and family, she decided to take action. Filing a lawsuit against Whoopi wasn't an easy decision, but Karoline felt she had no choice. If she didn't stand up for herself, who would? When news of the lawsuit broke, it sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. No one could believe that a relatively unknown lawyer like Karoline would dare challenge someone as powerful and beloved as Whoopi Goldberg. Overnight, the story became national news. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people supported Karoline, calling her brave for taking on such a high-profile figure. Others defended Whoopi, arguing that freedom of speech should protect her right to express her opinions even if they rubbed some people the wrong way. At The View, the impact was immediate. Rachel Dawson, one of the show's producers, watched nervously as the headlines piled up. She knew better than anyone how fragile the balance was when it came to talk shows like theirs. They thrived on controversy, yes, but there was a fine line between sparking debate and alienating viewers. Now, with a lawsuit hanging over their heads, that line felt thinner than ever. Rachel tried to keep things running smoothly behind the scenes, but it wasn't easy. The rest of the cast, Claire Simmons, Laura Bennett, and the others, were struggling to focus. Every conversation they had, every topic they discussed, felt heavier somehow. Even jokes didn't land the way they used to. The energy in the studio had changed, and not for the better. Outside the studio, advertisers started pulling out. One by one, companies that had once been eager to associate themselves with The View began backing away. "We don't want to be tied to anything controversial," explained a representative from one major sponsor. For a show that relied heavily on ad revenue, this was devastating. Without those dollars coming in, the future looked uncertain. But while The View faltered, Karoline pressed forward. Preparing for the trial was no small task. She spent countless hours poring over transcripts, gathering evidence, and building her case. Her husband, Daniel, did his best to support her, though he worried about the toll it was taking. Late at night, he'd find her sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You're going to win this," Daniel told her one evening, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know you will." Karoline smiled faintly but didn't respond. Winning wasn't guaranteed, and she knew it. Still, she refused to back down. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about setting a precedent. If she succeeded, it could change the way public figures spoke about ordinary people. It could give others like her a voice, a chance to hold powerful individuals accountable. Meanwhile, Whoopi faced mounting pressure from all sides. ABC executives urged her to settle out of court, warning her of the potential financial ramifications if the jury ruled against them. But Whoopi resisted. Settling would mean admitting defeat, and she wasn't ready to do that. Besides, she genuinely believed she hadn't done anything wrong. Sure, her comment might have been controversial, but wasn't that part of the job? Wasn't it her role to provoke thought and discussion? As the trial date approached, the tension grew almost unbearable. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, eager to capture every detail. Inside, both sides prepared for what promised to be a grueling legal battle. Judge Harold Bennett, a no-nonsense man in his late 50s, would oversee the proceedings. Unknown. For his strict adherence to rules, he wasted no time laying down the law. "This is a serious matter," he declared during the opening statements. "Both parties are expected to conduct themselves with professionalism and respect. Any deviation from that will not be tolerated." With those words, the stage was set. The courtroom fell silent as the trial officially began. Karoline rose to deliver her opening statement, her voice steady and clear. She outlined her case methodically, explaining why she believed Whoopi's comments constituted defamation. When it was Whoopi's turn to speak, she didn't mince words. Defending herself passionately, she argued that her remarks were protected under the First Amendment. By the end of the first day, it was clear this wouldn't be a simple case. Emotions ran high, and neither side showed any signs of backing down. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered holding signs and chanting slogans. Supporters of both Karoline and Whoopi clashed, adding to the chaos. Back home, Daniel watched the news coverage with a mixture-hidden text of pride and concern. He admired Karoline's courage, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was far from over. Little did he, or anyone else, know just how much this case would change everything. The trial moved into its second week, and the tension inside the courtroom only grew thicker. Each day brought new testimonies, evidence, and arguments that painted a clearer picture of the conflict between Karoline Leavitt and Whoopi Goldberg. For those watching closely, it was becoming clear that this wasn't just about one comment made on television. It was about power, accountability, and the boundaries of free speech. Karoline took center stage during these early days of the trial. Standing at the podium, she spoke confidently but calmly, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. She walked the jury through documents, emails, and video clips, piecing together her argument step by step. Her goal was simple: to show how Whoopi's comments had gone beyond harmless banter and crossed into harmful territory. "This isn't about hurt feelings," Karoline explained, pausing briefly to let her words sink in. "It's about the impact of words when they're broadcast to millions of people. Words have consequences, and mine did too. Consequences I didn't deserve." She recounted how her life had changed after the segment aired. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues avoided her. Even clients began questioning whether they wanted to work with someone who had become embroiled in such controversy. Karoline admitted that she'd considered walking away from the lawsuit multiple times, overwhelmed by the backlash and pressure. But then she remembered why she'd started this fight in the first place: to prove that no one, not even celebrities, should be above accountability. Whoopi listened quietly from her seat, occasionally jotting down notes or whispering something to her attorney. Unlike Karoline, Whoopi chose to represent herself in court rather than relying solely on legal counsel. This decision surprised many observers, but Whoopi insisted it was necessary. "If I'm going to defend my right to speak freely, I need to do it myself," she told reporters outside the courthouse one morning. When it was her turn to address the judge and jury, Whoopi stood up slowly, taking a deep breath before speaking. Her tone was measured, though there were moments when her frustration bubbled to the surface. "I've spent decades using my platform to give a voice to those who don't have one," she said, her gaze steady. "Yes, I made a comment that upset Ms. Leavitt, but I never intended to harm anyone. That's not who I am." She went on to explain the context of her remarks, emphasizing that they were part of a larger discussion about workplace dynamics. "We weren't trying to attack anyone personally," she continued. "We were debating ideas, which is what talk shows are supposed to do. If we start censoring ourselves because someone might get offended, where does it end?" Her defense resonated with some members of the audience, particularly longtime fans of The View. They admired Whoopi's willingness to stand by her beliefs, even under scrutiny. Others, however, remained unconvinced, pointing out that freedom of speech came with responsibility, a point Karoline hammered home repeatedly throughout the trial. Outside the courtroom, media coverage intensified. News outlets dissected every detail of the case, analyzing everything from the body language of the participants to the subtle nuances of their arguments. Social media exploded with hashtags like Charm Team Karoline and Stand with Whoopi, turning the trial into a cultural battleground. Melissa Carter did her best to shield Karoline from the noise. Every evening, she accompanied her friend back to the small apartment Karoline had rented near the courthouse. Over takeout dinners, they reviewed the day's events, strategizing for what lay ahead. Melissa also helped manage calls from reporters, deflecting invasive questions and ensuring Karoline stayed focused on the case. Daniel, Karoline's husband, joined them whenever he could. Though he worked full-time as a teacher, he made sure to attend key moments of the trial. Seeing him in the gallery gave Karoline strength, reminding her of the quiet support system she had waiting for her at home. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at The View, panic set in. Rachel Dawson, the show's producer, called yet another emergency meeting. Sitting around the conference table, the team discussed the mounting financial strain caused by advertisers pulling out. Some suggested toning down future segments to avoid further controversy, while others argued that doing so would betray the show's core identity. Claire Simmons voiced her concerns openly. "If we change who we are just because of one lawsuit, aren't we letting fear dictate our decisions?" she asked. "That's not what this show stands for." Laura Bennett nodded in agreement. "But at the same time, we can't ignore the reality of what's happening," she added. "People are losing jobs because of this. We owe it to our staff to find a solution." Their debate reflected the broader dilemma facing the entertainment industry. How could shows like The View continue to tackle tough topics without alienating viewers or risking lawsuits? It was a question with no easy answers, and the pressure weighed heavily on everyone involved. Back in the courtroom, Judge Harold Bennett kept a tight rein on proceedings. He interrupted heated exchanges with stern reminders to stick to the facts, cutting off emotional appeals that strayed too far from the law. His impartiality earned respect from both sides, though neither Karoline nor Whoopi seemed willing to budge from their positions. As the days turned into weeks, fatigue became evident. Karoline's once immaculate suit showed signs of wear, her hair less perfectly styled than before. Whoopi, usually energetic and animated, looked tired, her usual spark dimmed by the weight of the trial. Even the reporters covering the story began to look weary, their constant updates giving way to quieter reflections on the human cost of such high-stakes battles. One afternoon, during a break in the proceedings, Karoline stepped outside for some fresh air. She leaned against the courthouse railing, closing her eyes briefly as she soaked in the sunlight. Melissa joined her a moment later, handing over a cup of coffee. "You okay?" Melissa asked softly. Karoline sighed. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Some days I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Other days I wonder if it's worth all this chaos." Melissa placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," she said, "and whatever happens, you'll have done it on your own terms." Those words stayed with Karoline as she returned to the courtroom. The trial still had a long way to go, but she knew she couldn't afford to lose sight of why she'd started this journey. For better or worse, the outcome would shape not only her future, but also the future of public discourse in America. Little did she realize, the most pivotal moments of the trial were yet to come, and they would challenge her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. The trial entered its third week, and the emotional toll began to show on everyone involved. For Karoline Leavitt, the pressure felt like a constant weight pressing down on her shoulders. Each morning, she woke up earlier than usual, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced through every possible scenario. Would the jury see things her way? Had she done enough to prove her point? These questions haunted her, even as she stepped into the courtroom each day with a composed exterior. 1. Evening. After another long day of testimony, Karoline returned to her temporary office, a small rented space near the courthouse. It was cluttered with files, sticky notes, and half-empty coffee cups. She sat down at the desk, flipping through pages of notes she'd taken during the trial. Her eyes scanned over key phrases she'd underlined. Impact of public statements, emotional distress, accountability. Yet no matter how many times she reviewed them, doubt lingered. Daniel arrived shortly afterward, carrying dinner from a nearby diner. He set the food on the edge of the desk, watching as Karoline absent-mindedly picked at a sandwich without really eating it. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said gently, pulling up a chair beside her. "I don't have a choice," Karoline replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I stop now, everything falls apart." Daniel sighed, reaching out to take her hand. "You're not alone in this, you know. Melissa, me. We're all here for you. But you can't keep running yourself into the ground. You'll burn out before it's over." Karoline nodded, though she didn't fully believe him. This lawsuit had consumed her life, leaving little room for anything else. Even when she wasn't working on the case, her thoughts drifted back to it, replaying conversations, imagining counter-arguments, worrying about what might happen next. Across town, Whoopi Goldberg faced her own struggles. Despite her outward confidence in court, the stress of the trial was taking its toll. Late at night, she sat in her apartment scrolling through social media comments about the case. Some were supportive, praising her for standing her ground. Others were harsh, accusing her of arrogance or insensitivity. The mixed reactions left her feeling conflicted, unsure whether she was fighting for justice or simply defending her ego. Her attorney, Michael, visited her the next morning to discuss strategy. "We need to pivot," he suggested, spreading out documents on her dining table. "Right now, the narrative feels like it's leaning towards sympathy for Ms. Leavitt. We need to remind people of your contributions, the good you've done over the years." Whoopi nodded thoughtfully but remained silent. Deep down, she knew Michael was right, but shifting the narrative wouldn't be easy. Every move they made seemed to invite criticism, and the stakes only grew higher with each passing day. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at The View, panic reached new levels. Advertisers continued to pull out, citing reputational risks associated with the ongoing lawsuit. Staff members whispered anxiously in hallways, wondering if layoffs were inevitable. Rachel Dawson, the producer, tried to reassure everyone that the show would survive, but even she couldn't hide her growing unease. Claire Simmons and Laura Bennett decided to take matters into their own hands. During a commercial break, they pulled Rachel aside. "We need to address this head-on," Claire said firmly. "Ignoring it isn't helping anyone. If we want to regain trust, we have to acknowledge what's happening and show viewers we're still relevant," Laura agreed. "What if we dedicate an episode to discussing the lawsuit openly, not taking sides, just talking about the bigger issues it raises? Free speech, accountability, the role of media in shaping public opinion." Rachel hesitated, weighing the risks. "It could backfire," she warned. "But it might also give us a chance to reconnect with our audience." After much deliberation, the team agreed to proceed. They drafted a script carefully, ensuring the tone remained neutral and respectful. When the episode aired, Claire and Laura tackled the topic with grace, acknowledging the complexity of the situation without vilifying either party. Viewer responses were mixed, but the show saw a slight uptick in engagement, a glimmer of hope, amid the chaos. Back in the courtroom, tensions escalated further. Judge Harold Bennett called both parties to his chambers for a private meeting, urging them to consider settlement options. "This trial is dragging on," he said bluntly. "Both of you are losing, financially, emotionally, reputationally. Is there any possibility of resolving this outside of court?" Karoline listened quietly, her jaw tightening. A settlement would mean giving up the fight she'd worked so hard for. But deep down, she wondered if it might be the smarter choice. Whoopi, however, refused outright. "Settling sends the wrong message," and she insisted. "If I back down now, it sets a dangerous precedent. People will think they can sue anyone who disagrees with them." With no agreement reached, the trial resumed. As the days passed, Karoline found herself reflecting more and more on why she'd started this journey. Was it truly about holding Whoopi accountable, or was it something deeper? A desire to validate her own worth in the face of public scrutiny. One night, unable to sleep, Karoline called Melissa. They talked for hours, sharing fears and frustrations. Melissa reminded her of the importance of staying grounded. "No matter what happens," she said, "you've already made history. You took on someone most people wouldn't dare challenge. That says a lot about who you are." Those words gave Karoline a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, she walked into the courtroom with fresh resolve, ready to face whatever came next. Little did she know, the turning point of the trial was closer than she realized, and it would force her to confront not only her opponent but also herself. The trial had reached its climax. After weeks of arguments, testimonies, and evidence presented by both sides, it was finally time for the jury to make their decision. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Judge Harold Bennett instructed the jurors to deliberate carefully and fairly. Then, with a firm strike of his gavel, he adjourned the session. Karoline Leavitt sat silently at the plaintiff's table, her fingers gripping the edge so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She tried to focus on breathing steadily, but her mind raced uncontrollably. What if she lost? All the sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, would they have been for nothing? Melissa Carter, sitting beside her, placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Whatever happens," Melissa whispered, "you've already won in so many ways." Across the aisle, Whoopi Goldberg stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Her attorney shuffled papers nervously, while Whoopi herself seemed lost in thought. For the first time since the trial began, she looked smaller somehow, less confident, more vulnerable. Hours passed before the jury returned with their verdict. When they re-entered the courtroom, every pair of eyes locked onto them. The foreman stood up, holding a single sheet of paper that felt heavier than lead, cleared his throat and read aloud, "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Karoline Leavitt." A gasp rippled through the room. Karoline's heart skipped a beat. She blinked rapidly, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Beside her, Melissa let out a soft cry of disbelief, covering her mouth with her hands. Across the aisle, Whoopi slumped, slightly in her seat, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the verdict. Judge Bennett called for silence, then proceeded to announce the damages awarded to Karoline. The amount was staggering, far higher than anyone had anticipated. Reporters scrambled to write down the figure, while spectators exchanged shocked glances. The ruling sent shockwaves not just through the courtroom but also across the nation. For The View, the fallout was immediate. Within hours of the verdict, major advertisers pulled out entirely, citing concerns about associating with a program embroiled in such controversy. Staff members braced themselves for layoffs, and rumors of cancellation swirled throughout the network. Claire Simmons and Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to reassure their colleagues, but even they couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. Rachel Dawson, the producer, faced immense pressure from ABC executives. They demanded drastic changes to salvage the show's reputation, or risk cutting their losses entirely. Sitting in her office late one night, Rachel stared blankly at her computer screen, wondering how things had spiraled so far out of control. Meanwhile, Karoline found herself thrust into the national spotlight. Reporters camped outside her apartment building, eager for interviews or comments. Friends and strangers alike flooded her social media accounts with messages of support or criticism. Some praised her courage, calling her a hero for standing up to a celebrity. Others accused her of greed, claiming she'd only sued for money. At home, Daniel did his best to shield Karoline from the chaos. He answered calls from reporters when she couldn't bear to, and he reminded her daily why she'd started this fight in the first place. "This isn't about what people think of you," he told her firmly. "It's about proving that accountability matters, even for powerful people." Despite the mixed reactions, Karoline refused to back down. She used her newfound platform to speak out about the importance of responsible public discourse. In interviews, she emphasized that the lawsuit wasn't personal. It was about setting a precedent for how public figures should use their influence. Whoopi, on the other hand, retreated from the public eye. She released a brief statement expressing disappointment with the verdict but vowing to appeal. Behind closed doors, however, she grappled with self-doubt. Had she gone too far? Should she have settled when Judge Bennett suggested it? These questions haunted her, even as she prepared for the next legal battle. Back at The View, Claire and Laura spearheaded an effort to rebuild the show's image. They proposed shifting the focus away from divisive debates and toward uplifting stories that celebrated resilience and unity. It was a risky move, but one they hoped would resonate with viewers seeking positivity amidst the negativity surrounding the lawsuit. Their first revamped episode aired to mixed reviews. Some fans appreciated the change in tone, praising the hosts for addressing real-world issues without alienating anyone. Others missed the fiery debates that had defined the show for years. Ratings remained lower than before, but slowly, incrementally, they began to climb again. As weeks turned into months, the dust began to settle. Karoline returned to her law practice, choosing cases that aligned with her values. She also started writing a memoir, chronicling her journey from being an ordinary lawyer to becoming a symbol of accountability. Publishers clamored for the rights, and the book quickly climbed bestseller lists once released. Whoopi stepped back from hosting duties, focusing instead on producing content that gave marginalized voices a platform. Though her relationship with The View remained complicated, she acknowledged the role the lawsuit played in prompting meaningful change, not just for the show but for the entertainment industry as a whole. In the end, everyone emerged forever altered by the experience. What began as a clash between two determined women evolved into a catalyst for transformation, an unexpected silver lining in an otherwise tumultuous chapter of television history. Though the scars would linger, for Karoline, for Whoopi, for The View, they served as reminders of the power of words and the importance of responsibility. And perhaps in some small way, the trial had sparked a conversation that needed to happen. A conversation about fairness, accountability, and the delicate balance between free speech and harm. The weeks following the trial verdict were a whirlwind for everyone involved. For Karoline Leavitt, life had changed in ways she never imagined. The lawsuit that started as a personal fight against defamation had become a national conversation about accountability, free speech, and the responsibilities of public figures. While some praised her courage, others criticized her motives, leaving her caught between gratitude and frustration. At home, Daniel did his best to keep things grounded. He cooked meals, ran errands, and answered calls from reporters when Karoline needed space. They often spent evenings together on the couch talking quietly about what lay ahead. "You've done something incredible," he told her one night. "But now it's time to decide how you want this chapter of your life to end." Karoline nodded slowly, staring at the floor. Winning the case felt like both a triumph and a burden. She knew the money awarded wouldn't fix everything. It couldn't erase the stress, the backlash, or the months spent pouring her heart into the trial. But it gave her options, opportunities to use her newfound platform for good. One morning, she sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. Headlines filled the screen. Karoline Leavitt wins landmark lawsuit against Whoopi Goldberg. What this verdict means for free speech. How one lawyer changed the game. Scrolling through them brought mixed emotions. Some articles celebrated her resilience. Others accused her of greed or exploiting the situation. She closed the browser tab, took a deep breath, and turned her attention back to work. Her law practice had slowed during the trial, but clients began reaching out again after the verdict. Many sought her advice on defamation cases or disputes involving public figures. At first, Karoline hesitated. She didn't want to be pigeonholed into only handling high-profile cases, but eventually, she realized she could make a difference. Each new client reminded her why she became a lawyer in the first place, to help people navigate difficult situations and find justice. Melissa Carter continued to support her friend through it all. She helped Karoline sort through interview requests, turning down those that seemed exploitative and accepting ones aligned with her values. Together, they crafted a plan for how Karoline could use her story to inspire change without losing herself in the process. Meanwhile, The View struggled to recover from the financial blow dealt by the lawsuit. Advertisers remained hesitant to return, and staff morale plummeted as layoffs loomed. Claire Simmons and Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to rally their team, reminding everyone of the show's legacy and potential for growth. "We can't go back to the way things were," Claire said during a staff meeting. "This is our chance to reinvent ourselves, to focus on what really matters." Laura agreed. "Let's tell stories that bring people together instead of tearing them apart. Let's celebrate resilience, creativity, and hope." Their vision resonated with some viewers, though not everyone was ready to forgive or forget. Critics argued that the revamped format lacked the sharpness and edge that made The View popular in the first place. Still, Claire and Laura refused to give up. They believed in their mission and were determined to prove that positivity could coexist with meaningful discussions. Behind the scenes, Rachel Dawson faced mounting pressure from ABC executives. They demanded results, higher ratings, more advertisers, anything to stop the bleeding. Late nights became routine for Rachel as she brainstormed strategies to save the show. Sitting alone in her office, she scribbled ideas on sticky notes, pinning them to the wall until patterns emerged. "What if we partner with nonprofits?" she mused aloud one evening. "We could highlight their work and encourage viewers to get involved. It might not solve all our problems, but it could start rebuilding trust." Rachel pitched the idea to Claire and Laura, who immediately embraced it. Over the next few weeks, they featured interviews with activists, educators, and community leaders, showcasing initiatives aimed at improving lives across America. Slowly but surely, the tone of the show shifted. Viewer feedback improved, and a handful of advertisers cautiously returned. For Whoopi Goldberg, the aftermath of the trial was quieter but no less challenging. She stepped away from hosting duties temporarily, focusing instead on producing content that amplified underrepresented voices. Though she still appeared occasionally on The View, her role evolved into something less confrontational and more reflective. Privately, Whoopi wrestled with feelings of guilt and regret. She replayed the original comments that sparked the lawsuit over and over in her mind, wondering if she could have phrased them differently. Her attorney urged her to prepare for the appeal, but Whoopi wasn't sure she wanted to continue fighting. "I don't know if I believe in this anymore," she admitted one afternoon during a phone call with her sister. "Maybe I should let it go and focus on doing better moving forward." Her sister listened patiently before responding. "You've always stood up for what you believe in. If you think walking away is the right thing to do, then do it. But don't let fear dictate your decision." Whoopi spent days weighing her options. In the end, she decided not to pursue the appeal. Instead, she issued a statement acknowledging the ruling and expressing gratitude for the lessons learned. "I may not agree with the outcome," she wrote, "but I respect the process and the importance of accountability. Moving forward, I'll strive to listen more, speak thoughtfully, and uplift voices that deserve to be heard." As weeks turned into months, the dust began to settle. Karoline found solace in writing her memoir, pouring her thoughts onto paper late at night when the house was quiet. She reflected on the highs and lows of the trial, the sacrifices she'd made, and the unexpected friendships she'd formed along the way. Daniel read drafts of the chapters, offering encouragement and constructive criticism. "You're telling your truth," he told her one evening, "and that's powerful." For The View, the road to recovery remained rocky, but hopeful. Claire and Laura's efforts paid off as the show gradually regained traction, albeit with a smaller audience than before. Their focus on uplifting stories earned praise from viewers who appreciated the shift in tone. Rachel Dawson finally allowed herself a moment of relief as the show stabilized. Sitting in her office, she looked around at the sticky notes covering her walls and smiled faintly. "We did it," she whispered to herself. In the end, the trial left lasting marks on everyone involved. For Karoline, it was a journey of self-discovery and resilience. For Whoopi, it was a humbling reminder of the power of words. And for The View, it was a catalyst for transformation, a chance to redefine its purpose and reconnect with its audience. Though scars remained, they served as reminders of the lessons learned. Life moved forward, shaped by the choices made in the wake of the verdict. And perhaps, just maybe, The world became a little brighter because of it. Months had passed since the trial ended, and life began to settle into a new rhythm for everyone involved. For Karoline Leavitt, the dust of the lawsuit was finally starting to clear. Her days were filled with purpose as she balanced her law, practice, media appearances, and writing sessions for her memoir. Each chapter of the book felt like a step toward closure, a way to process everything she'd been through and share her journey with others who might need encouragement. The memoir, titled Standing Up, became an instant bestseller when it hit shelves. Readers connected deeply with Karoline's story of resilience, vulnerability, and perseverance. In interviews, she spoke openly about the challenges she faced, not just during the trial but also afterward, as she navigated fame and criticism. "Winning wasn't about proving I was right," she explained during one talk show appearance. "It was about showing that accountability matters no matter who you are." Her words resonated far beyond the courtroom. Schools invited her to speak at assemblies, where students asked thoughtful questions about standing up for themselves and finding courage in difficult times. Community organizations reached out, asking her to lead workshops on advocacy and conflict resolution. Though the attention sometimes overwhelmed her, Karoline reminded herself why she kept saying yes, to inspire others to believe they could make a difference too. At home, Daniel continued to be her anchor. He celebrated every milestone with her, from signing copies of her book at crowded events to receiving heartfelt letters from readers, thanking her for sharing her story. On quieter evenings, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset, and talking about dreams for the future. "I think we should travel more," Daniel suggested one night, flipping through brochures for destinations he'd bookmarked online. Karoline laughed softly. "You know I'm not great at relaxing." "You deserve it," he replied firmly. "Besides, even superheroes need vacations." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Maybe he was right. Meanwhile, The View found its footing again, thanks largely to Claire Simmons and Laura Bennett's efforts to reshape the show. Their decision to focus on uplifting stories paid off, drawing in viewers who appreciated the shift in tone. Episodes featured inspiring guests, activists fighting for climate justice, teachers transforming classrooms, artists using their work to spark change. "We're not here to divide people anymore," Claire said during one particularly moving episode. "We're here to remind everyone that kindness, empathy, and understanding can still guide us forward." The audience responded positively, and advertisers slowly returned, drawn by the renewed sense of optimism surrounding the program. Rachel Dawson breathed a sigh of relief as ratings stabilized and staff layoffs became unnecessary. Sitting in her now less chaotic office, she reflected on how close they'd come to losing everything, and how much stronger they'd become because of it. For Whoopi Goldberg, stepping back from hosting duties allowed her to explore new creative avenues. She channeled her energy into producing documentaries that highlighted overlooked voices and untold stories. One project, focused on grassroots movements led by women of color, earned widespread acclaim and reignited conversations about representation in media. Though she rarely spoke publicly about the lawsuit, Whoopi occasionally addressed it in interviews, acknowledging both her mistakes and the lessons she'd learned. "I've spent my career speaking truth to power," she said during a podcast appearance, "but this experience taught me that listening is just as important as talking. You can't grow unless you're willing to hear perspectives different from your own." Her humility earned respect from critics and fans alike. While some relationships remained strained, including her dynamic with The View, she embraced the opportunity to evolve personally and professionally. As time went on, the initial shock of the trial faded, replaced by reflection and growth. Karoline often thought about how drastically her life had changed. What started as a personal battle against harmful words had blossomed into something bigger, a movement encouraging accountability and thoughtful communication. One evening, after finishing the final draft of her memoir, Karoline decided to visit Melissa Carter. They hadn't seen each other in weeks due to busy schedules, and she wanted to thank her friend properly for all the support. Melissa greeted her at the door with a warm hug. "How does it feel to be done?" she asked, leading Karoline to the living room. "It feels freeing," Karoline admitted, sinking into the couch. "Like I've finally closed a chapter I didn't know would take over my life." Melissa grinned. "Well, you should be proud. You've inspired so many people, including me." They spent hours catching up, reminiscing about the highs and lows of the past year. As the conversation wound down, Melissa handed Karoline a small gift wrapped in plain paper. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them from college, smiling brightly at the camera. "For whenever you need a reminder of where you came from," Melissa said simply. Tears welled up in Karoline's eyes as she hugged her friend tightly. Across town, Claire and Laura gathered with the rest of the View team to celebrate the show's resurgence. Rachel Dawson raised a glass, her voice steady with emotion. "To second chances," she said, "and to proving that even in the toughest moments we can find a way forward, together." Everyone cheered, clinking glasses and laughing. For the first time in months, the room felt light, full of hope instead of fear. In the end, the trial left indelible marks on everyone it touched. Karoline emerged stronger, using her platform to advocate for justice and fairness. Whoopi grew wiser, learning to balance boldness with humility, and The View transformed, reminding audiences that even institutions must adapt to survive. Though scars lingered, they served as reminders of resilience and growth. Life moved on, shaped by the choices made in the wake of the verdict. And perhaps, just maybe, the world became a little brighter because of it.